Hey everyone, welcome back to Bible class. Today we're going to be taking a look at Genesis chapter 4, the story of Cain and Abel. While it's a popular story and a lot of people might know some of the details, I think there's a lot more for us to discover. So let's get into the text. And Adam had relations with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man, she said. Later, she gave birth to Cain's brother, Abel. So Cain is the first person born, and later he has a brother named Abel. We don't know a whole lot about the chronology here, other than Cain is older than Abel. Was he a year older? Was he 10 years older? Were they twins? We don't know. All we do know is Cain is older. In Genesis 5, we learn that Adam and Eve's next son, Seth, wasn't born until Adam was 130 years old, which was after Cain had killed Abel. But we don't know how old Adam was when Cain was born. All we can say for sure is that in the first 130 years of Adam's life, he gets kicked out of the garden, Cain and Abel are born, and Cain kills Abel. Now, Abel was a keeper of sheep, while Cain was a tiller of the soil. So in the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruit of the soil as an offering to the Lord, while Abel brought the best portions of the firstborn of his flock. And the Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but had no regard for Cain and his offering. So Cain became very angry, and his countenance fell. There's some pretty amazing things happening here. First off, Cain and Abel are bringing offerings. This is important for us to note because the Torah has not been given yet. We are obviously way before Moses and the Mount Sinai experience, so how do they know how to bring offerings? All of the procedures are given later in the book of Leviticus, but we're way back before that. This is one of the examples of the people knowing the commandments of God without him explicitly stating them in the text. There are a few places we can look, particularly here in early Genesis, where the people act in such a way as to keep the Torah without having it formally given to them. It seems as though the law was written on their hearts, or at least that God was communicating more to them than the text tells us. You see, when God corrects Cain in a few verses, he tells him, "Why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you refuse to do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires you, but you must master it." God seems to think that Cain knows what the right thing to do is. So there must have been some understanding of the sacrificial system all the way back here in early Genesis. So then the real question is, what did Cain do wrong? A lot of commentators give Cain a hard time for bringing the fruit of the soil instead of an animal sacrifice, but I have a hard time with that. When we learn about the sacrifices in Leviticus, we learn that there are actually 5 different classifications of offerings, and one of them is a grain offering. So it is totally acceptable to bring grain as an offering in the Torah. And we've already read that Cain was a tiller of the soil, so it makes sense that he would bring the fruit of his labor. Abel, on the other hand, was a keeper of sheep, so it makes sense for him to bring an animal. So I don't think it's what they brought that was the problem. So let's look at the text again. Cain brought some of the fruit of the soil as an offering to the Lord, while Abel brought the best portions of the firstborn of his flock. The BSB translation here helps us to highlight the difference between these offerings. While the word some is not in the original Hebrew, it brings some clarity to the passage. The juxtaposition is not between the fruit of the soil and the animal of the flock, but rather between the some and the best of the firstborn. The problem was the heart behind the offering. Abel brought the best that he had because he was acknowledging that everything he had received from God. So this response was to give it back to God in thanksgiving. Abel, through his offering, was declaring to God how thankful he was. Abel was willing to give up the best that he had because he knew that God had provided him with it. God had given him everything, so why hold anything back? This is a picture of total surrender and recognition that God is ultimately our provider. Cain, on the other hand, brought some of the fruit of the soil. Cain intentionally kept the best for himself. He did not bring the first fruits, the first ripe fruit from the crop. Instead, Cain just brought some of his crop. In doing so, Cain was declaring that he was the one primarily responsible for his success. Cain worked the soil, Cain tilled the ground, so Cain got the best. He was not willing to acknowledge that God was the one who provided. It might have been because it was hard work to work the soil. After all, the ground was cursed in Genesis 3. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through toil, you will eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it will yield for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat bread. But that's no excuse to forget that God is the one providing. That's no excuse to become proud. Later in the Torah, God warns us about becoming proud. In Deuteronomy 8, God says, when you eat and are satisfied, you are to bless the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. Be careful not to forget the Lord your God by failing to keep his commandments and ordinances and statutes. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, then your hearts will become proud and you will forget the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. It seems as though Cain forgot the Lord and became proud, failing to recognize that God was the one who provided that for him. God was the reason he was having any success. This is the same trap that you and I can fall into every single day. We are so abundantly blessed and taken care of that we can easily forget that we don't deserve any of it. I have a house, I have a warm bed, I have food in my fridge, all because God is good and provides, even though I don't deserve it. God, who obviously knows this can be a pitfall, tells us in Deuteronomy 8 how to protect ourselves from making the same mistake Cain made. When you have eaten and are satisfied, you are to bless the Lord your God. This is known as grace after meals. What? Grace after meals? I thought we were supposed to pray before we eat. Well, I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying that the only biblical prescription for praying concerning food is to pray after you eat. We have plenty of examples of praying before eating. Namely, Jesus does it, so it's certainly a good practice. But there's something different about praying after you eat. When you pray before you eat, you're hungry. You have a need. And it's easy to remember God when you have a need. It's easy to be thankful for something when you need it. But what about when you're full? What about when you don't need anything? That's when it becomes easy to forget the Lord your God and become proud, thinking that you are the one doing the providing, like Cain did. Sure, we work hard at our jobs, but we need to remember that God is ultimately the one doing the providing. When we forget that, like Cain did, when we refuse to do what is right, sin is crouching at our door. It desires us, but we must master it. So thanks for joining us today here at Bible Class. I hope this was as much fun for you as it was for me. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns or criticisms or critiques, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'm always amazed at where the text takes us. So check out our Genesis 5 lesson where we explore the meaning behind a seemingly boring and lifeless genealogy. But that's next time on Bible Class.